AI can automate tasks, but it can't automate responsibility.
Exactly. With every technology transformation, whether it was mobile or even before that, the industrial revolution, people become more productive. A lot of your day goes into very manual, repetitive tasks. If you read some of the blogs like that SaaS is dead, and same thing, Satya Nadella even highlighted a month back that a lot of these tools, SaaS products, will end up being databases, but then agents will do a lot of automation across these tools. The speed at which the innovation has been happening, like things which were not possible a month back or 2 months back, now are becoming possible. It's like this area itself, agentic AI, that has been growing very fast. The cost can be a fraction. We see cases where for tasks like customer support, the cost is as low as 1/10 versus if you had used. Hey, Kaden, nice meeting you. A bit about myself, born and brought up in India. I did my major in maths and computing. I worked in Wall Street for a few years. This was the 2007 time. Lehman Brothers went bankrupt, and that's where I worked. But then I came to US for MBA to explore like what are some of the. After that, I joined Google. Worked there for close to 10 years. Moved to product there. Worked across different areas. I work in ads, Google Assistant, which was the virtual chatbot, and Nest. After that, I moved to a fintech called Greenlight. We were building products for kids to drive financial literacy. Recently, I moved to this startup called Emma. So we are building a horizontal agentic platform to automate business processes. And I can cover a bit more on that, but I joined 4 months back, and that's where I'm working. Outside work, I'm a dad to a 2-year-old daughter. So outside work, she takes up all the time. So yeah, that was a bit about me.
Yeah, there's no hobbies with young kids.
I know before she was born, I asked some of my friends, and what did you do over the weekend? And a lot of times it was just kids. And now I see myself giving those responses. So yeah, they keep you busy.
Yeah, very, very, very perspective changing. I'm glad you did it. Lehman Brothers, that's a very interesting story. I don't want to have you go through any PTSD memories, but it does show that you've been around for some big macro trends that have happened in the world. You've been at the center of it. Tell me a little bit more about EMA. What made you want to jump into here? The premise is the universal AI employee, agentic experiences are very top of mind lately. What was the origin story there?
So Emma, here we are building a horizontal agentic platform to drive business automations, no matter which area you are in, whether you are in customer support or finance or sales, engineering, product. Like a lot of your day goes into very manual, repetitive tasks. And this is something like I've worked at Greenlight, Google as well, like how we can make employees much more productive and automate many of these tasks. Generally, if you look at companies, only roughly 1/3 have been able to automate some processes, and even what they have done is very rigid. And that's where Emma comes in with the advent of AI, generative AI, and agentic AI. Now the technology is much more powerful to drive a lot of business automation. What we are building is a conversational OS for enterprise. So what that means is like even somebody who's not an engineer who can't code, you can tell Emma like what is the process you want to automate through conversations. And Emma is able to pull together different agents and cover a bit about what agents are, but these are specialized entities which are very good at some specific tasks. So it can pull all these things and automate the business workflow. If you look at an enterprise, they use roughly 100 SaaS products. With the advent of cloud, the problem became more widespread because now it's much easy to onboard to a new SaaS product. But what that does is like you have 100 products which don't talk to each other. And that's why a lot of automation hasn't happened. What we are building with agentic AI is each of these tools you can automate and build automations across these things. So these agents can work with multiple tools or multiple products you have, and it can drive full end-to-end automation, which can suppress the data silo issues we had. So it's a pretty new startup. We started building it 2 years back. It came out of stealth in April. We have many large employees, including some of the like companies like Wipro, Moneyview, KPMG, and all. We are Axel portfolio company. So, and we have like strategic investors like KPMG, Hitachi, Wipro, who we are working with to build more and more of these business use cases.
Like, let's talk a little bit more about the problem with SaaS, especially B2B enterprise SaaS. I had this interesting experience where we got a new product leader, right? And uh, what I've noticed, like when any new executive comes into a team, even like in like any of like the cross-functional partners teams, it's always like retooling effort to the tooling preferences of that executive. And so there's a perfectly good process for something. There's a tool in place, but it's never the bias of the incoming leader who is going to have the budget to procure SaaS tools to use that tool. It's going to be like, hey, I need to make this mine so that I could get like a quick win. I could document like an SOP around it. And I was, it leads to these discussions of like, hey, should we use like this tool or this tool for writing documents? And it's like literally a commoditized feature set. Even you could say like, well, this tool provides a wiki, and then you start wondering like, well, like the whole premise of a wiki is because was created from like the early days of the internet. Like there was no like specialized, well designed SaaS tools that like remove the need for a wiki, right? Like why does Jira Product Discovery exist? It's because everything was in a wiki before for the product manager to keep track of everything, and it was too cumbersome to do it within the normal Jira instance, which is very delivery focused. So it was nice in between Confluence and Jira. And you look at tools like Linear that are objectively better and remove the need for a wiki. All your documents are in the context of initiatives and projects. It doesn't matter if the ICs having to use the tool can want the better tool. It's based off preference. I feel like that's the root issue of why most enterprises have different systems. Like finance will be like an Oracle shop, and then the revenue org will be a Salesforce shop. There is a horizontal solution from one of those companies, but fat chance that those market segments like the finance org and the revenue org are going to align and make a more cost-effective software play. That doesn't sound like a really easy problem to solve.
So, and one of the thing of what you did mention, like different companies or different parts of the organizations are using specialized tools. These journeys need connection across all these tools. Maybe there's an opportunity with your sales team created in Salesforce. Somebody creates a legal document or contract for the vendor. Once they sign it, they might create an onboarding doc, create a ticket for the servicing team to onboard them. Within this journey, which is one process, like you used 3, 4 different tools. And what currently is there, like each of these tools don't talk to each other. So they have their own data silos. Salesforce doesn't know what's happening in ServiceNow and vice versa. And as a result of which, you have humans who are bridging this gap. Like something happened in Salesforce, now I'll create a contract in DocuSign and then create a ticket in ServiceNow. So that's what we are trying to with agentic AI. It's much more powerful where we feel that agents will be able to orchestrate these multi-step flows. They'll be able to talk to all the different tools you are used to. So you're relying on less human input to manage this. A lot of these things, which are much more complex, can be automated. If you read some of the blogs Emma's CEO wrote like 6 months back, like that SaaS is dead. And same thing, Satya Nadella even highlighted a month back that a lot of these tools, SaaS products, will end up being databases, but then agents will do a lot of automation across these tools. That's highlighting how the entire ecosystem is changing and how agents will drive a lot of the business automation layer. And a lot of the SaaS products will have their own data models on the back end, but a lot of these workflows will get automated. That's one of the changes which is happening. The other big change which is happening is a lot of these SaaS products, they charge per seat. So they charge for all the employees, even if only 10% of the employees are using it. So you are paying for the full employee base. And that's also the other trend which is changing, where more and more companies, including Emma, are charging based on outcome. So if you're writing in big RFP or you are driving some automation, we charge for each run or each RFP generated instead of the number of seats. In that case, you can better align your cost with what revenue or ROI you are driving. So that's the other big trend, which makes us feel that the entire landscape of SaaS will change as agentic OS becomes more and more prevalent.
If the listener isn't familiar with the Satya Nadella quote, is he basically just says that like most SaaS is forms on databases, which is true. Most software in general is list views and detail pages, reminiscent of the analog era with file structure and documents. Even the LinkedIn feed or social media feed is a list view of different posts, and there's a detailed view of that post where you get a little extra detailed information. And every product team's roadmap is trying to make the digital form smarter, right, and come up with novel visualizations of the data to justify a licensing fee. All of those forms on databases get bought by different departments within a company. The inevitable outcome is financial ops, revenue ops, business ops, like just these glue roles that their job isn't to be good at anything. It's to be the glue and like connect the different systems and business processes and make sense of everything. And so instead of saying Emma's this automation AI agent, just saying it's an AI employee, sounds like you're going after those people's jobs. I'm not saying that in a negative way, but it's like, okay, like, could you use like the current LLM technology to replace that glue person? Because I don't think distributed budgets are going to go away. People are going to still want like the preferred tools, but like the glue person is always seen as optional, the first in layoffs. How do you tackle that?
So a lot of it is not replacing, but capacity. Over the past many years, we have seen increasing pressure, like teams getting downsized, where the work doesn't change, but it's less people who have to do more work. And also, there are some areas where there's a shortage of supply. If you look at healthcare, clinicians who are doing a lot of the checks or doing the paperwork, there are not enough people in those jobs. So there's a big gap of like the demand for those roles and the supply. And where we aspire to be is being able to help bridge those gaps. Right now, Emma is getting used across different areas like customer support. Those are some of the areas which started seeing the transition much earlier. But as the LLMs and the technology is becoming much more powerful, then a lot of areas which require reasoning, like in healthcare, like there is a clinician like who goes through all the complex drug rules and applies those things on your case and makes a decision. This process used to take like multiple hours, if not days. Now that can be done in a few minutes and with agentic AI. So as more and more of these technologies are becoming powerful, we'll be able to get more done with less employees or able to bridge the gap which is currently there in the workforce. Like, for example, the healthcare system where you don't even have enough people to do those work.
I like what you said about augment. There's a pretty popular LinkedIn post. I don't remember who wrote it, but he said that AI can automate tasks, but it can't automate responsibility.
Mhm.
And so there still needs to be a responsible party. I mean, if anything, agentic AI could also be helping the glue person, you know, like the coder, when I mean in the medical space, there's a coding type role where it's like
Exactly.
dealing with documentation and like paperwork and stuff. Like if you gave them an agent to deploy for the mundane tasks, I actually just talked with the founder of Speakeasy, which is APIs and SDKs, and it's solving the mundane aspects of API and SDK documentation, where you still need an engineer to drive it and supervise, but you're not having to draft the documentation or even take the first swing at coding the API design. And yeah, you're just increasing their capacity because usually there's not enough glue people anyways in
Yeah,
like the real world. But it's hard for like a CFO to justify it.
exactly. And also with every technology transformation, whether it was mobile or even before that, the industrial revolution. People become more productive. They have newer responsibilities. If the basic coding can be done by a code, then you spend more time on doing more design or more complex type of tasks, so which increases the overall productivity. So with every technology revolution, and this one is expected to be much bigger, people will become more productive. They'll be able to focus on their tasks on much more important things. Like in healthcare, you can imagine like if a doctor who has to, after every visit, you have to document everything. Now, if AI can help you do that, then you have more time to spend with the actual patient. But if 30-40% of your time goes into a lot of this paperwork and documentation, then you have only so much time to actually look at the patient. Just an example, but same thing you'll see everywhere, where if the mundane tasks get taken over, then you have more time to spend on more productive, higher impact tasks versus these repetitive tasks.
Yeah, I just saw the news that Klarna had the biggest AI flop of the year. It's actually quite hilarious. They tried to replace all their customer service with AI agents, and now they're hiring back customer service people after a year. I think it was a very interesting experiment. I guess someone had to do it. I'm glad that someone did it so that you can see what happens. But it's still 5 a.m. in the morning. It's still very early. The sun hasn't even come up yet. We don't even know the potential of this thing. And it's like, I think augmenting is like the critical path forward for like the next while.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I think people shouldn't be afraid of being replaced. You should start thinking about being a better thinker and analyst, because eventually even core trade responsibilities are going to get automated. Where do you draw the line? Because there's not a lot of like tact when it comes to like tech companies either. They're like going all in and like trying to replace people and justify removing headcount. And there's people that are like, nope, we're just going to do SaaS. Like AI is a hype, or maybe they just add a chat bot that hooks up to their database and it answers questions, but doesn't really solve a customer problem.
Yeah.
Like, what heuristics have you found is the right middle ground of what what is pushing the capabilities of this current technology, and like what needs to be augmented in the workflows? Like, because you have very specific workflows on the marketing page for Emma. How do you do that product discovery and decide your way into the roadmap there?
Exactly. So what you mentioned, like when ChatGPT launched, a lot of these things became mainstream. Before that, AI has been there for a really long time. And like at Google, when I started like 12 years past, like we were using AI for building products, but a lot of these things became mainstream and people could see the value once ChatGPT came in. And since then, the adoption across enterprises has been really great, increasing exponentially. A lot of them are just building, tinkering with it, running some pilots, kind of wrappers on top of OpenAI, Claude, Gemini models. But more and more, we see companies trying to do more, not just have a Q&A, which I think it can do pretty well. But a lot of our customers are actually asking for automation of end-to-end journeys. As the LLM technology is increasing, they are much more confident, but it's a balance where you try to see some use cases working, and then you have more confidence to sell within the company of being able to handle more and more use cases. So it started, a lot of it was like Q&A, customer support, but we are seeing deployments in healthcare for handling complex claims processes. Even in customer support, roughly 85% of their tickets with some customers can be resolved without any human intervention. And the CSAT score, like one of the customers like we are working with in India, it's a big fintech. They have been seeing 100% growth year on year, and they were not able to hire enough support people to be able to cater to this need. And we started working with them, and 85% of the tickets Emma is able to answer without any human involvement, and their customer satisfaction changed from 45% to 75%. So as you can imagine, like a lot of the technology is delivering very tangible business results. So with that, what we see is more and more customers are adopting it beyond customer support and looking for multi-step journey. They're looking for end-to-end automations that can read something from Salesforce, do some research with some set of agents, and then write this thing in some other tool. So they're looking for end-to-end automations, but that's just like where we start with our smaller use cases, and then as they see business outcomes, they expand to more and more use cases. That's what we have been seeing across the customers we have been working with.
Yeah, the most common reason for those 80% of tickets is that it's an answer that could have been answered just by going to the FAQs section of the website. It's usually obvious questions, or it's a signal to marketing and communications that we haven't really like communicated the product correctly, or it's a signal to the product team, like the UX designer, that the user hasn't intuited the value of this feature or this part of the process, and so they're just opting to hit up customer service for basically like tech support assistance of like how to use like a happy path use case. And if those are being taken up by, that's very like cost ineffective to just have the customer service team help with teaching people how to use the product, right? But it's also technically difficult to prioritize any enhancements to the product that would reduce those tickets in the first place. So this almost buys time to the customer, because the customer doesn't care if the product gets improved. Like if they got the outcome through an AI agent, like, and they're satisfied with the service, like that's all that matters. But there's an implication there that like, oh, if you can improve satisfaction by having an AI act as a customer service employee and the customer is satisfied with that experience, then where do user interfaces fit in future?
Yeah, exactly. And there are many different reasons why AI outperforms. First of all, like you have the same bar, right? In
Yeah.
customer support, you might be talking to different people, they might be trained in different ways. Not every customer support agent might be specialized in all the products, which is always a bit of an issue, especially for companies which have a big breadth. So with AI, at least like you have some standardization across all the products so it knows the basics. The second thing we see is a lot of times you are calling customer support and have to wait for 10 minutes just to talk to an agent, or it might ask you to call during business hours. AI is always 24/7 present. The moment you can call, I can pick up the phone and respond back to you. Or if you submit a ticket, it can respond back instantly. So a lot of these things are great experience for the consumers who don't have to wait. You get a consistent response the moment you type in the questions versus waiting for somebody. But there'll always be some questions which are much more complex. It needs reasoning. And that's how the customer support in general is structured: tier one, tier two, tier three. Right
Mm-hmm.
now, tier one, a lot of it can be done by AI with very high accuracy. And tier two also, like a good chunk of it. As the technology improves more and more of these things, we would be able to deliver with very high or human or higher accuracy. That's how we measure. We try to compare performance to a human, and it has to be better or comparable to human. That's how we see.
So I'd imagine that the interface here, I mean, Zapier's done it where they've tried to integrate AI into their UIs where you could generate a workflow. It all comes back to like the process diagram metaphor, right? In order to build trust with the AI agent, you need some kind of artifact that lets you know where to set the guidelines for the AI agent besides having to like chat. Um, have you found that, like, for example, Brian Chesky says that like chat's probably not like the best interface for AI. You might have to use like, you know, I guess adaptable UI. Google's developed it, like adaptive interfaces where it's normal, like it's still buttons, list views, and forms, but dynamically output depending on your inputs and queries. What have been the challenges adoption of this tool? Does it have to do with usability and helping them configure the agent, or is it as simple as creating a Zapier-like interface that allows them to give process steps and tell them how to interact with other systems?
So in terms of the experience, like we have different modalities, like you can use chat. We have a table, like an Excel type of an experience for more complex interactions. And a lot of these chats, like partners also, our customers integrate into their own UI. But in terms of like the experience, one thing try to do is make sure if it's responded by AI, we are very clear to the users. They know they're responding to AI. And if it needs to be handoff to a human, then we have very clear handoff points so that we can build trust uh, with the users on that. In terms of the adaptive UI, we have been building or making it much more robust. If you use Workday for managing your leaves or Salesforce for managing your sales opportunities and contact, if you want those things to be done through some other interfaces like chatbot, then you have to dynamically create those experiences. So if you want to show them the right set of forms or the workflows, that's something we have been building. Many of those things are live as well, where depending on the use cases, like we generate the UI on the fly. Now it can be done much more easily where the process is like a few steps out. We are trying to expand how it can handle different types of interactions. Some of those things are currently work in progress, some are in production, but the goal is like how a lot of the front end or the interfaces on the fly versus having to go into some tool or product with Emma. If you want some task, you can just do a query and it can only show you the things you want versus all the features which the particular app might have.
Yeah, so it's like contextual navigation on steroids, where
Exactly.
you give it the context of like, what do I intend to do with the system? And then it will surface the workflows that you need to do instead of you having to learn navigation and sweat the details on taxonomy and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Metaphor. We're all basically librarians when we get into navigation. How can you get into the system and quickly be shown what to do next? It does sound like a differentiator. And does answer my question. I'm curious to see how the winners in the next 5 years in this space figure out how to do it well, what the best practices are going to be, because there's no rule book here. I'm going to double click on exit points where it's like, if you can't do this and you feel stumped trying to resolve this, like AI, like here's an exit point to pass off to human. I've actually never heard of that solution. It's more like you have to supervise it. The human driving the AI has to decide, okay, stop processing. I'm going to take over now. It's kind of like Tesla self-driving. Like, oh, actually, I don't like your judgment call here. I'm going to take over the car. Where did that come up? Because you can't, that's not like implicit. You have to explicitly call that out when you're developing the product.
There have been experiences, especially on customer support, examples where like if AI chatbot is not able to do something, it will hand off to a human and say that so and so will now take over. That's
Oh,
where
yeah.
you start talking to a human or chatting to a live human at that point. But those are some of the things like which already exist. Now, we have to build on top of what already exists and have much more seamless interfaces where it's not just for chatbots, but for example, if you're doing a business automation, there might be some cases where you try to apply logic or reasoning in evaluating a case, but AI is not 100% confident. So we do in the product have human in the loop capabilities where you can configure it that always require a human approval before you proceed. Or you can also set that if you are less confident, then only trigger that human intervention. So in that case, like if it's very highly confident, then it might completely go through the workflow without need for an approval. If evaluates how confident it is, and if it's less, there might be a breakpoint in the flow. We have built human in the loop interventions where it'll ask a human to look at it, review it, and then approve it. So those are some of the capabilities with agentic AI we are building into the product. If you are a customer, then you can decide like how confident you are in to giving that control to the agents versus looping in the right set of folks as needed. We already see some of these things in cases where you are looking at a case and you are evaluating whether it's pass or fail. So you don't want that thing to go directly to the customer. Whoever has applied for, say, a loan or something like that, you want a last check by a human. In that case, like the admins who are using the product can set like always require a human approval. But in many cases, you might be confident require approval if needed. So in that case, like the agents, we are making it possible where the agents can evaluate how confident they are and they can request a human intervention at that point.
What's the most painful experience trying to develop an agentic AI product?
So I've joined pretty recently, so we are still
Yeah.
trying to get some of these things started. I think I wouldn't say painful. I'll say like the technology is moving very fast. A lot of those things which were not possible before, like every month you'll see some of the new research coming in or some of the newer models. A lot of those things can get unlocked. I'll give one example. Agents, you want them to be able to take actions within different tools or different products. Now, for that, till now, the way to do that was through APIs. As a tool, say Salesforce has APIs, then agents can use those APIs to make the right calls, take some actions. Now, a lot of products in different industries might not have APIs, or the APIs are not very well fleshed out, or you might not have access. That's a problem which can be localized to different areas. In healthcare, a lot of technology is not completely through APIs. A lot of products still use old technology. But with some of the recent innovations like Operator from Claude and Anthropic and OpenAI, a lot of those things got unlocked where you don't always need an API. You can train the model or the agent to be able to do the clicks, which the human will do and operate in those tools as well. So, what I'll say is not a very painful experience, but the speed at which the innovation has been happening, like things which were not possible a month back or 2 months back, now are becoming possible. One thing we try to be very close to is where the technology is changing because every day, every month, new and new use cases get unlocked.
I'd imagine doing product at an AI company requires a lot of reading. How do you stay on top of all the new findings?
Just a lot of reading, like research papers. You have a lot of blogs, but a lot of news we try to do. We have ML team, which also stays on top of all the research happening in the industries at some of the big companies. So that's how we do, and we share within the company, like any new paper, any new research, we try to socialize it so that like it might have some use case in different areas. So yeah, a lot of
Yeah.
reading and
What would you recommend for good sources on research papers? Because I think academic papers are not as intuitive. And then also, I see a lot of people on LinkedIn saying, like, hey, there's this new research paper. And I'm like, where do you find that? Like, I don't always understand where the sources are. I know you could go to Google research and stuff like that, but maybe it's that simple.
yeah, generally like Archive, that's a site which has a lot of these research papers. But then you have to look at more like what are the tasks you are trying to automate. If it's about agents and orchestration around that, there might be specialized papers in those areas. So then it becomes a broad area, and you try to find different fields, like whether it's you're doing more multi-model. Also, if you follow some of the newer models or like Google and what OpenAI are doing, then also you'll be able to see what research papers are driving those. So I'll say many of these sources we use to keep a tab of the research in areas we are interested in.
Here's what I learned from you in the last hour. The product patterns, like SaaS's typical patterns, list views and detail pages, aren't necessarily going away. In agentic AI experience, there has to be some kind of like configuration experience for the customer where they can basically onboard the employee or the agent and then provide guidance on when to loop in human reasoning, like the responsible party. How exciting the world's getting with the agent experiences from Anthropic and OpenAI. This is the last topic for this episode. An agent clicking through the interface of another tool is still interacting with the API, right? When you click on a button, it's triggering an API. It's the existential question I'm having is, do we have to train them to use the tool, or does like usability have to consider like, hey, can a LLM understand how to use this tool, or do you have to train the LLM to be like, well, okay, the button for this is over here, so you go here, and what happens if the developers of that software change where the button is? How do you stay on top of that? How do you approach the requirements for that?
No.
Yeah.
So the technology which used to exist before was relying on the pixels that this button shows up on the top right.
Yeah.
And that's what it does, which was very error prone because you might change the UI, you might change where the different features are there and it stops working. But with the latest technology, like it's able to understand like where to find and able to perform. Now it's not 100% accurate. It's still a work in progress in terms of the technology, but it's not relying on exactly knowing the pixels of where the button is. It's able to use the frame and AI to see where the click might be needed and project that. So it's much more powerful than what existed before. This technology is so new, and we have been doing a lot of work on that, especially in areas like healthcare, where a lot of these tools might not have good set of APIs to use externally. This is good progress, but it's not completely there for using across all applications. And it might have some accuracy issues, but it's much more powerful than whatever existed before.
Just for basic CRUD operations like data entry, like click and create a new instance of this object in the database, fill it out based off what is in Salesforce. And maybe looking at it as like, I want it to do what a human does. Really, that could just be like smoke and mirrors. Really, what the AI is doing is looking at the inspect tab, of actually looking at the HTML, navigating the divs, and looking for a button div with the right tag on it for like an implied action. And they're like, okay, I'm going to click on this button div because it was asked to do this action. That sounds way more feasible than like, hey, learn how to use this AI, like UI. It's just, it does sound possible. Like it just needs more time. Do you feel like there is anything that hasn't been said that should be said before we sign off?
Yeah,
And
I'll say like this area itself, like of AI automation or agentic AI, that has been growing very fast. We started 2 years back, came out of stealth in April last year, and we have seen a lot of adoption and also inbounds on being able to solve different workflow, the journeys, which is pretty exciting for us. I'll highlight one other product we just launched. It's a mixture of experts model called Emma Fusion. Currently, a lot of companies to use AI, they might use OpenAI or Gemini models. And now what mixture of expert model means is like we have a small model which sits on top of all the publicly available model. Like we have 100 plus models, which includes all of OpenAI, Claude, Gemini, a lot of the open source models, specialized models, and it can decide which ones to call and can call many of them, combine the output, and that can help you get the highest accuracy at the lowest cost. The highest accuracy because for each task or set of tasks, it picks the right model. Claude might be pretty high in the ranking for coding. OpenAI models may be very good at reasoning, but uses the right model or set of models to get you the highest accuracy by using a lot of open source and cheaper models for tasks. The cost can be a fraction. We see cases where for tasks like customer support, the cost is as low as 1/10 versus if you had used GPT. We are seeing a lot of adoption as companies are moving from pilot to production. A lot of them are not just caring about the accuracy, but cost becomes a big barrier. And that's where a lot of companies are looking for solutions which can work across all the different models to get them the lowest cost. Also, we saw DeepSeek coming out of nowhere, like where you might have built your entire stack relying on OpenAI, and then you have much more powerful models coming in, which are much cheaper. So with some of these expert models, that's also more future proof. As soon as these models came in, we added those things within a week so that customers always have access to the best available in the market and you don't have to do anything. I'll say both the AI employees for business automation and Emma Fusion, we are seeing good adoption with both. In case you are interested, reach out to us. If you have new use cases, would love to spend as much time. on those to understand those and trying to find a solution. But in case you're interested in being part of Emma and our journey, you can reach us out on either LinkedIn. We have the careers page. So just a small plug, but
Yeah.
we are hiring quite a bit.
And so this is local to Silicon Valley.
We have 2 offices. So we are based in Mountain View and in the Bay Area. We also have a big presence in Bangalore in India. And we are hiring across the board in both locations.
And that is spelled, if you want to go to the website or LinkedIn, it's ema.co.
CO.
C-O. Yeah. So ema.co
Right.
if you want to look it up, or just Emma Unlimited is the LinkedIn page. I just wanted to touch on what you just talked about, where I didn't even think about that when you're talking about fusion, where it's kind of the same force of capitalism, right? What made Amazon so disruptive is that it automatically price matched, like scrub the whole internet for very similar prices. And then when you hit the checkout page, it would lower the price to match whatever is the cheapest in the whole internet. And it reminds me of the story of this like retailer complaining to Amazon. That's the power of the internet. It gives the consumer the ability to find the best offer for the best price. It's not, and it's very like a consumer buyer driven experience. You're almost making like it's same thing for like, no one really like directly, the reason we have travel aggregators like Kayak and Expedia is because you're not always getting the best price going directly to the hotel. So the hotels have to come up with these programs to incentivize people to go direct, but they're kind of beholden to these aggregators. You can find the same hotel room for a better price. And it's like aggregators on aggregators, like hotels.com could be like aggregating from different travel aggregators to get the best price. And for AI, if you want this aggregator model that's connecting to all the base big models and then optimizing costs, that's very interesting. Super glad I met you to talk about it.
Yeah, and it's great for accuracy because no single model will be best in all areas. You get the best accuracy, but also on the cost side, you can have a lot of cost saving because each of these types of tasks has a cost accuracy curve. For simple tasks, no matter which model you choose, the accuracy won't change that much. So in that case, for a lot of them, you can use a cheaper open source model to address that, while very complex tasks or which need a lot of reasoning, you rely on a much more powerful, larger model. With a fusion model, enterprises don't have to do that legwork of deciding what to use when. We do that legwork. OpenAI had 2 outages in December, a couple of hours each. So if you're relying on one vendor, then you go through business disruptions. If you use, like, say, Emma Fusion, if one model goes down, we just use the other models. So your business runs 24/7 without any disruption. So that's the other part of it, is the fault tolerance in the system, which you provide.
Yeah, I played around with the different Claude and OpenAI's APIs and traditional automation tools, but you'd have to make some pretty sophisticated automations to replicate that functionality of backup flows. Like, hey, you'd have to add air handling, all that stuff, when you could just buy like an off-the-shelf logic there for backup models. But Anshul, this has been super interesting. Thanks again for coming on the show. You have a good one.
Thank you, Ken.
Hey listener, thanks again for listening to The Way of Product. As we power down today's session on the fusion of creativity and technology, let's solidify the energy you've gotten from our dialogue today. If you've gleaned insights or strategies that could turbocharge your projects, I have a small but powerful ask. Swing by the platform where you're hearing this and leave a review. Think of it as your digital high five to us. It's a fuel that propels this content to more creative technologists like you, amplifying the impact of the shared knowledge. So until our next interview, keep pioneering and pushing the envelope. Thanks again for lending your ears and your imagination to our community. Catch you on the next download.